This is McLeod INSIGHTS, where we feature conversations with longtime transportation industry veterans who are now team members at McLeod Software. Our goal is to support and empower our customers by helping them learn about proven ideas and best practices that will have a positive impact on how they run their companies. Let's dive in.
Hello, and welcome to McLeod Insights. I'm Robert Bowen, and today my guest is Tiffany Geeks. She is the product manager of Loadmaster here at McLeod Software. Tiffany, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Robert. How are you?
Good. So today we want to talk about change management, and really change management and the principles of change management and how they apply to the trucking and the 3PL industry. There's a lot of books, a lot of gurus out there, a lot of consultants and methodologies that address change management. But in a general way, what's your view and how would you explain change management?
Change management to me is just a constant state of change, and I think most companies in today's world are always going through change, and knowing how to manage that change and how to work with their employees, work with different softwares and different aspects of their organization to ensure that that change is going smoothly is super important. And I think in today's world, it's more important than ever to manage that change successfully.
Right. So before you hit pause or fast forward and stop the recording, let's take a minute and look at what this means to the trucking industry. We're not going to talk about what change management is, but we're going to talk about it, how it relates to buying new software or implementing a new process in the trucking and the 3PL logistics market. So Tiffany, when you think about change management, it's maybe new software. It may be an internal software, a new product that they may be using, a new way of brokering loads from maybe changing from a Chicago style to a buy and sell style. We could be doing a new mobile comm platform, something new. Whatever you're planning to migrate to or change to, how does change management fall into that?
Well, you need to know, first of all, why you're making this change. Changing any sort of software or mobile comm vendor or any sort of platform means that you're making a decision that your current software is not meeting your needs. What that need is, we don't know. But the change management that goes along with it is saying, I have this need and this change is going to satisfy this need. And being very purposeful in saying why you're making these changes. I know when you're changing a mobile comm vendor, for example, it's incredibly disruptive. You have to touch every single asset you have. You have to train your drivers on a new app or a new tablet, and change is very scary for the driving force out there. So you have to be able to explain the why of the change to even have your change management start to be successful. It's very important that you're understanding the change, the management of it, and the purpose for it. Because if you don't have a purpose for it, or you don't elaborate on what your purpose is to your employees, they're not going to buy into it. They're going to be like, why are we changing this thing? I've been doing it this way for 20 years. I'm going to continue to keep doing it this way for 20 years until you give me a compelling reason why I should be changing.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to date you in any way, but I know you've been in the industry for a long time.
I have.
So tell me about some of your experiences that you've gone through where change management, especially dealing with software in the industry, has affected you.
Change management, and especially around software, I think I've been doing it the entire time I've been in the industry. It feels like when I was working at a reefer asset carrier, we changed mobile comm vendors, and let me tell you, working with the drivers and trying to explain to them why changing the vendor was so important to us at that time was really challenging. And we had to have buy-in not only from the driving force, we had to have buy-in from the office staff, and that was everybody, because everyone has to communicate with the drivers. So implementing this new software meant everyone had to be trained on it, everyone had to know how to do their job in that software and the reasons why we were making that change, how it was going to make their jobs easier, if there's any obstacles or any reasons why it made their jobs more difficult, how we had an answer for that. And I think that's something that a lot of companies need to be aware of, is when you change something, people's jobs will change. How they interact with their daily workflow is going to change. So if they know why that change is happening, and they are able to identify new barriers. If you can figure out ways around those barriers or through those barriers, is very important to get that buy-in from the company that you're working with. Another change management I was a part of was a payroll software company. So we were using a third-party payroll processor, so we would get everything to gross in McLeod, and then we would send it to a payroll software provider to do the taxes. And that was very challenging because it touches every single employee yet again. Everyone has to onboard with a new platform. They have to look at their pay stubs in a different way, and making sure all the data was right and everything kind of made sense. That was really quite the undertaking, and a lot of people didn't understand why that was happening, and it was never really properly told. That story was never told to us, so it was really hard for some people to say get the buy-in for why that change was happening, and it was quite interesting to go through. Not every change management, not every new implementation is successful. So those ones that aren't successful, you have to learn a lot from why they weren't successful and how you can do it differently the next time.
So do you in that situation, do you believe that it would have been a little bit, or if it was better communicated to the end users why the purpose of the change,
Yes,
then
absolutely.
they could have been more acceptable to it, you think?
I think so. And I think for change management, if you understand the why, it's very important. If you're understanding the impacts to the business and that reason, the why behind that reason is very important. And I also think doing it incrementally is super powerful. There's a lot of books, as you said at the beginning of the podcast, about change management and how to manage it. And I'm a really big believer in micro changes, like little small ones every day to make up that bigger change. And when you try to eat the whole elephant all at once, it's really hard to get it all down. So if you can figure out ways to make it really small and bite size and make everyone kind of understand and have a stake in it, it's a lot easier for you to kind of go through that change.
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments on that. So do you believe that change management really comes in small steps?
I think the most successful change management comes in very small, very incremental steps. I think if you do a 1% change every day, you'll get there. If you try to do 10, 20, 30% change every day, you're going to lose your audience, you're going to lose your crowd, and ultimately I think the project could fail.
So let me ask this, and I just thought about this on the fly. So if you're making an incremental change and it's a small change to this one particular group, it's obviously worth explaining to that group what the change is. But do you want to communicate that change to everyone?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think I'm a big believer in having transparency, especially around software changes, so people are kind of aware of what's going on. You never know who has used that software before or who has some experience or exposure to it, so you never know who's lurking in other departments that could provide very valuable insight. But I think if it's just one department only and it's a small group, that group is going to be going through something, and I think it's really important for the rest of the organization to know that this team is going through this change because of XYZ reason. So kind of be more empathetic, be more human about it, and maybe they're stressed out or having a bad day because of that change, and it's good that their other teams are aware and that they're willing to work with them on making that change be successful.
Do you think that making small changes means micromanagement?
Absolutely not. I think micromanagement is its own person, it's its own entity, and it's not necessarily how change management is. I think if you do small incremental changes every day, especially when you're implementing a new software, micromanagement may feel like it's happening, but if it's done in an appropriate way, it won't actually occur. I think micromanaging is just a bad term that people kind of throw around a little bit in change management, and that's not necessarily the case. If you have the right metrics, if you have the right data points, and you know why you're doing your change, there's no need to have a heavy hand in the management of it. It will take care of itself.
Yeah, but it's I think it's used in human motivation.
I agree.
But it's not necessarily as productive as it would seem sometimes.
Exactly.
So if it's done in small changes, how can you measure that? How do you know that it's really working?
So if you have your why, you should have some data points behind it. I mean, we live in the year 2023. I mean, there's data points behind everything in today's world. So there's got to be a numbers reason why we're doing it. Either it be financial, or maybe more productivity, or more orders to the systems, more driver messages coming into your software, more carriers that you're onboarding. there's a reason why you're going to do this change. And if you have the numbers and what you're after, you can start measuring it as soon as you turn it on to see that change is happening. And if the numbers aren't meeting what you expected, you can also take an inner look and say, why is this not working? What are we doing that's not giving us what we're thinking we should be getting? And I think that's very important and very valuable to be measuring your change. So if you're halfway through it and it's not giving you what you want, and you know you're going to have to go back to your old software or go back to your old process, you can make that decision early on instead of being all the way through the project and having it completely fail on you.
I think there's a difference in thought that you, just because you're installing new software, that you have to have a new process to go with it, and
Right.
that may not necessarily be the case.
I agree, especially if you're getting a brand new TMS. I think it's really important that you get on that TMS as quickly as possible, and then you start refining your processes. As you learn and get more comfortable with it, there's a lot of different ways you can do things inside the TMS softwares, and you can start figuring out what makes the most sense for our company and how the software is built and designed.
So I think a lot of people are resistant to change because of that, because of the unknown.
Right.
And you give them one piece of new software,
Right.
but they want to do it the same way they've always done it, and it may or may not work for them.
Correct.
And so frustration builds.
Frustration absolutely builds, and that's one of the things I love actually about FlowLogix is that you go live on Loadmaster and you figure out how to use everything, and you're like, man, I really wish I could have this automation. I wish I could have this data point, and then you can just put FlowLogix on top of it, and away you can go. And that's a great way of looking at how you can use the products inside of the McLeod ecosystem to help drive some change. You can look and say, what is unique to our business that we need to make different? What are our customers asking us to do differently that's making us have to change our processes, and what can we use and leverage in the software space to get us there?
Yeah, I think a lot of the newer systems that are on the market, including ours, we hear from our customers that say the new generation catches on faster than some of the older generation. But in the trucking and transportation world, you're always going to have a mixture of both.
You always are. Yes.
So how do we get past that barrier of that mindset, thinking that this new guy is going to learn faster than this experienced guy?
I know in the transportation industry, especially on the asset side, people that have been around have seen a lot, and they understand a lot about what happens. And trucks break down on the side of the road all the time, and a new employee would not know what to do with that. While a seasoned employee knows exactly how to find the closest truck stop, how to call the repair shop, how long it takes for a truck to be down, how to get a driver into another truck, even recovering the load. These are all aspects in transportation that a seasoned veteran will know while a new person won't. So when it comes to change management and software, I think the veterans need to say, this software might help me get my job done faster, and I can spend more time with my family, or I can do more throughput in the software, or maybe I can help my drivers be safer. There's no telling what that software can do if you manage that change appropriately.
So if I heard you correctly, I think it's easy, or you should identify the supporters and the skeptics pretty early in the process.
Absolutely. And I think you have to win over your skeptics. I've been known to say, you're not my friend right now, and it's okay. You can yell at me and you can hate me for a while. It's like, but in 6 months, let's revisit, because I bet I'll make your life better. And every time they'd be like, oh, you were right. Or I hated you for those first couple of weeks. And they're like, but now I love you, and now I love this process. And hey, can we do this now too? So I think it's really important that you identify your skeptics and your champions very early on, and make your champions really drive the change, and then work on winning over your skeptics, because the skeptics will turn that corner. You just have to show them the way.
They will. I think they do, and we don't give them enough credit sometimes.
We do not. And usually they're the ones that always find that problem.
I've been in your shoes before.
Yeah.
I've been on site with people, those seasoned veterans who may start out as not liking you, but they're the ones who become your advocate before you leave for the day.
And usually they're the ones that are the fastest through the system, because they want to learn the quickest way to do something, and they want to understand all the system can do.
Yeah. So I think there's a disconnect there, that we have a separation where there really shouldn't be a separation.
Correct.
We should be able to work together, because we train people as if they were new and old seasoned guys.
Right.
So I think it's great the way we do it.
Yeah, I agree.
When you have some large drawn out changes, how do you look at those compared to the small changes, and how do you bring all the small changes together?
So the small changes are your easy wins. They're the small things that you do every day that make the day better and more manageable. The big, long, drawn-out changes, you have to break them down. You have to make them into these bite-sized little micro changes, if you will, because gigantic projects, people get project fatigue and they'll kind of burn out on it. So you have to you do have to break it down. You have to make it more manageable. You have to say, we're going to do this today and we're going to do that tomorrow. So that way people kind of understand, like, oh, we don't have to do all these things all at once. We're going to do this today, we're doing that tomorrow, and then we're going to learn from what we discovered over those past 2 days and continue forward. I think it's really important to take these gigantic, big projects and make them much, much smaller and much, much more manageable.
And I think a lot of that comes from the top down.
I agree.
think as long as the team stays informed about what the goal is, and we make milestones and we're able to reach those milestones, then I think that's very important, but it does come from the top down. So, Tiffany, I believe the real goal for leaders in change management is adoption. What's the best way to measure adoption?
And measure adoption is usage, the data points we discussed earlier, and I think it's how's your competitive advantage? Are you saturating the market in a different way? Are you adding on a new type of business? Are your processes changing? Whatever the reason for that adoption, for the reason for the change will help drive the adoption and will help measure out why you're making that change. I think it's important to have that identified before you even start your project. So that way you know when you're hitting your milestones, you know if you're getting what you need out of it. And I think it's super important that if you're doing a change management, especially if you're buying new software, you have some hard data points available to you before you even start your project, so that way you can start measuring it from the second you turn it on.
Okay. There's a couple of 4 principles that I've always tried to keep in mind when going through something new like this, especially when it deals with software. And one of those is you can't please everyone. What's your thought on that?
You can never please everyone. I mean, it's almost like a human trait. Like, every day you're going to come across somebody that's having a bad day, and you're just never going to make them happy. I think it's the same way with change management and new software. There's always going to be that one person you're not going to satisfy for whatever reason, good, bad, or indifferent. And you just have to identify them and also know at some point you just got to let it go. As long as it's not, the owner of the company or the person driving that change, everyone else will kind of fall in line, and eventually they'll get used to it and they'll kind of move on. I think it's also just a maturity and growth thing. As you do more change management and you go through more software implementations and software changes, especially in today's world, we're doing it all the time, you get kind of used to that change and you kind of embrace it, and you don't get so stagnant anymore. So it's just identifying it and just being able to let that negative Nancy kind of have their moment and then just move on and continue on with what you're doing, keeping that project on time.
Yeah, I think that a lot of change goes on in companies today, really on a daily basis. It seems like we're always changing. Our customers are always changing something to stay competitive in their little niche of the world, and we're trying to help them out in that aspect. But yeah, I agree. There's people are more accustomed to change these days, and blame that on COVID or whatever. But I think we are more accustomed, and we can adapt a little bit easier. What do you think about the second one? Is change takes time? It
does. I mean, back to the whole 1% idea. I think change is a constant, but change also takes time. You're not going to be able, we can talk about like running, for example. You're not going to be able to run a marathon tomorrow, but if you run 5 miles every day, and you start with 1 mile and you work your way up, you're going to get there eventually. Same with change management. You gotta know where you want to go, and you just gotta slowly whittle away at it. It's hard, but it's what you got to do to make it successful and long lasting.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about change takes time is that it's hard for people to wrap their mind around what the change really is. I think when you tell them about it, they don't really understand it. It takes time to understand how it affects them, how it affects them day to day, whether it's beneficial or not beneficial. They can't make a judgment on that. So I think some of the human nature kicks in at that point. And change does take time. But another one principles I stick to is visibility of change is critical.
I agree.
So give me your thoughts on, I think people approach change differently. So
people do approach change differently, and some people like to keep it a secret until they're all done, or like, look at this thing I've done, and other people like to share it incrementally. In my work as the product manager of Loadmaster, I like to have customer feedback about every 2 weeks and say, is this right? Is this wrong? Can we tweak it? And I think it's really valuable and important. And I know that every time I'm going through a change management of some sort of project, the more often I can get that feedback loop, the better things are, and the better I can kind of progress through that change and making sure it's meeting everyone's needs.
Yeah, you kind of call it a feedback loop. I always called those fence sitters until they made a decision on which side of the fence they really wanted to be on.
Yeah.
So those are fence sitters. So I think the more you get visibility on the product changes and what the end result is, the better and faster you get that adoption.
I completely agree.
And the fourth and final one that I go by is, again, leadership. Everything comes from the top. They've got to explain why they're doing the change, make it common sense for the people who are the end users, and show how it will benefit them. Absolutely.
I have seen projects completely fall apart when the owner didn't understand why we're doing it. When the top leadership was like, I don't know why we're doing this, the whole project completely fell apart, and you lost hundreds and thousands of dollars. And on other projects that have gone very successfully is when the leader is engaged. We're going to do this. This is why we're doing it. How's it going? What can I do to help? When a leader is more engaged with that change, it's always far more successful. If they disconnect from it and don't do any sort of check-in, the projects usually kind of languish out there, never land. They never really get to completion. And then it's also a waste of everyone's time and money. So that's the worst thing you can do in an organization, right?
And talk about waste and time and money. And this is definitely a personal opinion, but I've seen this change management bounced around different industries and different markets for several years now. And people go through the whole gimmick stage of buying banners, T-shirts, or whatever. I think that's great for some companies, depends on the energy level in the company, but I've never really bought into that part of it. Mm-hmm. It's not, business in some aspect, it's not a game. It's how most companies live and die on their business day to day. So what would you say to those people? I get having fun at work, but let's keep it real.
Let's have some fun. Absolutely have some fun at work. We're all here to do a job. Work, I say it all the time, work is work, but you can't have fun working. And I think that goes along with the change management. If you have fun doing it, it's more enjoyable. Everyone will kind of get along and get on board. But if it's hard and it's kind of a slog, it's really difficult to get it through. Now, the T-shirts and the gimmicks have their place for sure, but they're not a requirement for a good change management, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think T-shirts and gimmicks, now drivers do like hats. I'm all about hats.
I love me a good trucker hat.
Yeah, get the driver a hat. One thing that was told to me years ago was, hey, the last thing you say to the driver is what the driver's going to think about for the next 12 hours. So
exactly, it's a very real thing.
So if that's something positive you want to give them before they leave for their trip, hey, go right ahead. Well, Tiffany, thanks for your time today. I hope that was beneficial to talk about change management in whatever form or fashion you guys may be doing it. But software is changing daily, and McLeod is changing daily as well. And again, thank you for your time, Tiffany.
Thank you, Robert.
All right.